We're headed back into the book of Revelation this morning, and we've reached chapter 3, and so we're going to be focused on the first church there, the church of Sardis. The church of Sardis. And I understand that sometimes when we start looking at some of these, obviously most all of them had at least some negative about them. And so it can be easy maybe for us to feel like, all this is a negative study. And I don't want it to just be that, and yet I recognize that sometimes that's part of the caution that we have here in these verses, chapters 2 and 3. But let me just read just a little bit of this to you, and just kind of the highlights or lowlights, depending how you want to look at it, in this passage. And in verse number 1, he says, I know thy works. We've heard that before. And then he says that thou hast a name that thou livest and art dead. And so that's the first area that I want to just kind of draw to your attention. And then he goes on right away in verse 2. He's saying, be watchful, strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die, for I have not found thy works perfect before God. So there's a way out, or some improvement that can be made. And then in verse 4, he says, thou hast a few names, even in Sardis, which have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. And so that's just a few of the verses, but that gives us sort of the basis of what I want to share with you today. And I suppose the key thought there is that sometimes things are not as they seem. In the first aspect, we have those who had a name that they were alive, they may have gone to church, and they did a lot of good things, and they were keeping up the show, could I say? And yet God saw that it wasn't like it seemed. He said that they had a name that thou livest and art dead. So he's really saying you're not really pleasing to God, even though to everybody else it might look like everything's fine. And this issue, I don't know if the church at Sardis was really plagued with hypocrisy exactly, like we would think of it, or if it was more a matter of you may even think you're alive. Not that you're just having a wrong profession and you don't know any better, but you may think everything's fine. But I can see deep down inside and there's a problem. So that may be one aspect. I'm not totally sure about whether they thought everything was fine or not. They were still doing the works, apparently, and yet their works were not perfect before God. And just a quick reminder that really he's the only one that matters. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. We may even think that we're okay. We may think someone else is okay. But it doesn't matter what we think. What matters is what God thinks. And so that's the first aspect. The other thing that wasn't quite as it seemed is when you start reading through here and you see, wow, they are quite a problem church in some ways. And so, how can anybody really be very right with God, you might say, in this situation here? But he says in verse 4, there are some, even in Sardis, even surrounded by all these others that are not really what they seem to be, there are some that are still right with God. There's a few names, even in Sardis, which have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. Really, I suppose I've maybe dealt with this before. I've at least told others, maybe not here on this channel, but I have at least mentioned before that there may be a number of people that are right with God, they're pleasing God, they're doing what he wants them to do, and they're going to be in heaven, regardless of the church they attend, regardless of sort of, could we say, the name that is over the door, what they identify as far as a particular denomination or a group or whatever. There may be a number. The fact is, it might be surprising sometimes, depending on your perspective. It might be a little surprising sometimes to realize who God sees as worthy, the ones that God sees, that they have their garments white. And again, it's not so much what you think, what I think, what somebody else, what we might judge them to be. What matters is what God says. And so I want to just kind of admonish us today. let's be careful we don't just have a name that we're alive and in reality be dead. But let's also not just allow ourselves to be kind of pigeonholed into a certain type of person. Let's just be followers of God. Let's just be like Jesus. And if we will, then we can also walk in let me get that worded right. They should walk with me in white, yes, for they are worthy. And so may we safely make it into the city, in spite of whatever else anybody else may think. May we just simply be what God wants us to be. And so today, I just admonish you with that. I don't care where you come from, what your past has been, what church you're even in necessarily. I mean, I care because I want you to get the truth, but you can be a Christian no matter where you are, no matter what your background may be, if you'll just simply mind God. And so I urge you to do that today.